Welcome to class today, young historians. Our focus today in Western civilizations is going to look at and examine the rise of the Franks in Western Europe. Now, there are some notable locations, and I would pause this to add these dates to your timeline and also to your Google map. The location that I want you to add on Google Maps is going to be Tours. Okay, this is going to be this area right here. And the dates are going to be 457 CE. That's when we're going to have King Clovis. 732 CE, which is the Battle of Tours, and 800 CE, which is when Charlemagne is crowned the Holy Roman Emperor, and 962, which is the actual start of what we refer to as the Holy Roman Empire, or if you're Adolf Hitler, the First Reich. Alright, let's get right into it. So 476 CE, a Germanic general, Odoacer, he disposed of the last Western Roman Empire. Now, Rome at this time was kind of susceptible to outside attacks. Really wasn't a location that these Germanic people wanted to occupy. So they came, they saw, they conquered, they left. So what we see after this is that Rome is kind of a backwater influence in this region of the Italian peninsula. And so in lieu of a Roman Empire, a Western Roman Empire, what we see is that there is a series of Germanic kingdoms that start to emerge. Now these Germanic kingdoms are going to absorb a lot of that Roman influence, Christianity for example, law, and so on and so forth. And of these Germanic kingdoms, the most successful are going to be the Franks. Alright, so take a look at this map and feel free to pause me at any time. What you see are some of the groups or the nations that exist within Western Europe, these Germanic tribes. Now, a lot of these are going to become eventually the modern states of of Europe. So you can take a look here. We talked about Odoacer and his influence here, Burgundy, and these names are in Latin, not to be confused. Visigoths, Saxons, Britons, and so on and so forth. So you can see it was a pretty interesting conglomeration of Germanic tribes. Now, like we talked about, the Franks were originally Germanic by nature. Okay, and originally they were allies with the Romans and kind of defended the Rhine frontier, which would have been kind of that German, French kind of area from the Vandals and the Huns. However, when the Roman Empire, the Western Roman, mind you, empire fell, the Franks kind of invaded northern Gaul and viewed that as an opportunity to kind of take control of that area within that power vacuum. So you can take a look here at this map. This is a great map. You're going to see this again a few times today. Is that here's the Frankish territory in 481. So kind of small, all right? But after this, we see kind of a general growth in its territory. And eventually what we see by about 814 is that the Frankish kingdoms is for the most part going to occupy the majority of what we refer to as maritime Europe, and also kind of getting into Central Europe as well. Here's the same map, just a little bit bigger. So if you're kind of, or if it's kind of hard to see, this is better for you. So just take a look, pause this, look it over, and we'll talk about kind of the growth of the Frankish Empire in different segments here. Now, where does it start? Now, the birth of the Frankish kingdom, for the most part, can kind of be attributed to this guy Clovis. Now, Clovis was a influential Germanic kind of kinsman, and where he kind of comes into play is he's very influential in this region. And he makes this really kind of crazy move. And what he does is he converts to Catholicism. And what you see within this image is kind of a depiction, an artist's depiction of what this would have looked like. I have another one here as well. Alright. He looks a little more intimidating in this one, I think. Anyways, what happens is that when he makes this conversion to Catholicism, this moves him closer in alliance with kind of the Roman subjects in Gaul. So this religious preference kind of unites similar religious followers and such. Okay? So by doing this, Clovis is able to eventually become one of the largest kingdoms in Europe, after the fall of the Roman Empire. Now, eventually, what Clovis establishes is going to be split. We'll get to a map. We'll get to a map in just a moment. You can see this, but it's going to be split in 3 different sections, and these 3 different factions are going to compete with one another eventually until people realize that that is very ineffective. And so what you see eventually is that there are going to be new officials called mayors that come into place, and they're going to unite these 3 kingdoms together and really kind of bring about a new age within kind of the Frankish rule. And the dynasty that we're going to look at when they kind of come back together is the Carolingian dynasty. Now the Carolingians are going to have a long, healthy dynasty and kind of influence in Europe. So again, you can see the origins of a Frankish territory started here. You can see the division then following Clovis. And eventually we're going to come back together to have a kind of a united Frankish empire. Again, this is kind of the Carolingian Empire, 770 to 814. You can see the influence of where they are centered here in Europe, and kind of their movements to the east, also to the south as well. So they're looking to expand. All right. So the 8th century, which would have been kind of the 700s. All right, this it really marks kind of where the Carolingians extend Frankish power. So the dynasty gets its name from its founder, Charles Martel, which is also known as Charles the Hammer. And he gets this nickname because he is a very, very crude, very brutal ruler. And one of the battles that he actually is able to succeed in is the Battle of Tours in 732 CE, where he defeated invading Muslim armies that were kind of moving into Western Europe. So if we take a look at this, this is going to be the Islamic influence here throughout the region. And you can see that they have moved into the Iberian Peninsula, and they are actually going to move a little bit further north until they encounter Charles Martel. And he's able to kind of push them back out of that region, out of this, out of Gaul. Now the Frankish realm reached a high point under Charles Martel's grandson, Charlemagne, or Charles the Great. Okay, and he inherited the Frankish realm and expanded its boundaries to dominate much of Central and Western Asia. So we can take a look here. So what does Charlemagne kind of inherit? It would be this area right here, and you can see, looking at this, the conquest of Charlemagne, he's going to expand it into Central and Eastern Europe. Again, just another map, and I like maps. You're going to see this kind of throughout this semester. And what I like about maps is that you're able to kind of see this area within context of what else was going on within certain areas. So you can see the Carolingians here, and this would have been in about 814, the height of Charlemagne's empire, and then some of the other areas that were happening here in the southern portion, the British Isles, and then in Eastern Europe as well. Now 800 CE marks an important date, and what happens in 800 CE is Charlemagne accepts the title of the Holy Roman Emperor. And so we see that Charlemagne is going to kind of have a legitimate claim as kind of the rightful ruler, and this is kind of the pinnacle, if you will, up to this point in history of Frankish power, where the Pope is going to crown him the Holy Roman Emperor. Now, don't be confused, the Holy Roman Empire does not come to fruition just yet. Now, Charlemagne's only surviving son, Louis the Pious, lost control of regional authority. So after Charlemagne is no longer in power here, his son inherits this. So in 843, he divides the kingdom into 3 equal portions, and they kind of rule as kings. And what we know from history is that anytime we do this, it isn't very good for the overall kingdom. There's a lot of competition that emerges, and eventually this is going to weaken Frankish power ultimately and leave it susceptible to outside influence and invasion. Now, the decline of the Franks, what we see is that this really diminishes their role kind of in world politics at this moment. So trade from other areas of the region are weakened, and what this does specifically to the Franks is it hurts a lot of the Viking trade, but also with North African Arabs in the south. And so what these two groups do is they kind of reverberate back to raiding and piracy, which causes a lot of chaos around the empire. So what happens then is that they have to kind of figure out a way to employ some kind of protection. And so what we see is a greater dependence on knights, and a lot of power is given to nobles to protect the empire. And eventually this is going to kind of be the hallmark of the Middle Ages, where the nobility is going to be the supreme influence in terms of politics or land control. Now, we talked about Charlemagne's successor, Louis the Pious, divides his property. This is not good for the Frankish Empire at all. You see a greater emergence of civil wars. Power is transferred to the nobility, okay, and soon a lot of the lands become, instead of being unified, they become independent states. Take a look at this, just kind of to reiterate where the Carolingian Empire was following Charlemagne the Great, where it's divided. And let's take a look at this. Now, the Carolingians had no navy, so they were more or less kind of a land-based empire, and so that means that they were susceptible to kind of outside sea-based attacks and such. So if we take a look at this, there are three different individual or groups that are going to attack the Carolingian Empire. All right, from the north we have the Vikings, from the south we have the Muslims, and from the east we have a group called the Magyars, and they're going to really wreak havoc here on this portion of the empire. So what we see overall is just the total collapse of political authority. This is Europe in 1000 CE, and this is another one. You can kind of pause this and take a look at this, and you can see how chaotic, how complex and diverse really kind of the ethnic makeup would have been and political makeup of Europe was. So again, with the decline of the Frankish Empire, that kind of allows some of these other smaller entities to come to fruition and have a stake in Europe. Now, after the dissolution of the Carolingian Empire, Western Europe became largely a society that was fragmented, and so there were tons of competing regional states. Now, as we look through Western civilization, we'll see that competition in this sense is a great thing, all right? But at this point, it is not good for the Carolingians. But like anything, when a big civilization or kingdom collapses, there's a power vacuum. And so in the wake of the Carolingian collapse, Otto of Saxony was extremely politically aggressive. This was an opportunity. Why not take advantage of it? So he ventured into Italy to protect the church, all right, in this time of chaos. And so as a gesture of gratitude, Pope John XII proclaimed Otto emperor in 962 CE, and thus began what we refer to as the Holy Roman Empire, or for you modern scholars, what we call the First Reich. Now, Voltaire quips something very interesting, and I think this is kind of humorous. He says that the Holy Roman Empire was neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. And we'll talk about that as this class progresses. And so you can see what the makeup of the Holy Roman Empire would have been like. And you can see it is absolutely just speckled with diversity and stuff like that. So you can see this is going to be a very interesting place to kind of unite. And throughout history, we're going to see some issues that happen because of that. But that concludes our look at the Frankish empires. I appreciate you tuning in. And tomorrow, we'll look at kind of medieval society, and we'll see what that entails. All right, have a great day.